A lot of interesting news from late last week and over the weekend, and we're going to start with a New York Times article, which is reporting that sometime in the next few weeks, President Obama is expected to issue orders freeing dozens of federal prisoners locked up on nonviolent drug offenses. President Obama will probably commute more sentences at one time than any president has in almost 50 years. Quote from Julie Stewart, the founder and president of Families Against Mandatory Minimums, says, "I think they honestly want to address some of the people who have been over-sentenced in the last 30 years. I'm not sure they envision that it would be as complicated as it is, but it has become more complicated, whether it needs to be or not, and that's what has bogged down the process." This is actually quite fiscally conservative, right? The imprisonment of nonviolent drug offenders is tinged with racism. It is one of the most obvious examples of disproportionate application of the law. And why do we want resources going from a conservative fiscal standpoint to crimes which are not shown to be gateways to violent crime and theft and burglary, etc.? Widely analyzed, it would be fiscally conservative to do this.
Yeah, it would be, and I'm all for not having my tax dollars go to something like this. I think this is an important step, but we also really need to reclassify marijuana, and there need to be some big changes. But this is great as well.
The New York Times continues. Lawmakers from both parties are collaborating on legislation, and the United States Sentencing Commission has revised guidelines for drug offenders, so far retroactively reducing sentences for more than 9,500 inmates, nearly three-quarters of them Black or Hispanic. Even for those convicted of, in the broader context of more serious crimes than marijuana possession or low-level selling of marijuana, which is now legal in some states, there are still important things to look at here. Quote, among those Mr. Obama granted clemency in March were 8 prisoners serving life sentences for crimes like possession with intent to distribute cocaine, growing more than 1,000 marijuana plants, or possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Now we are getting into more than just a nonviolent possession of marijuana, small amounts, but we're talking about life in prison. That also doesn't make sense, Lewis.
Yes, you are essentially, without a doubt, ruining someone's life. And in cases of people possessing small or somewhat large amounts of other really, the nasty drugs, instead of offering them help, you are still ruining their lives instead of saving their lives.
Now, if you hear me talking about this and you point just to private prisons, you're missing a big part of the picture, because remember that private prisons hold a small portion of the country's total prison population. 6% of state prisoners and 16% of federal prisoners are held in private prisons. This is not nearly enough to be solely responsible for the high imprisonment rates in the United States. We have to recognize this as an issue of the justice system, and we have to recognize this also as an issue of the profit motive that exists in too many industries. It's not just private prisons that benefit from mandatory minimums and high imprisonment rates. Drug companies have decreased competition when you jail marijuana dealers, for example. Law enforcement departments make themselves look like they're actually doing something good. They fill their bank accounts with seizures, as we've talked about many, many times. Big banks now have ownership stakes in big pharma and in the private prisons. So now you have big banks on the side of harsher sentences for drug-related crimes. And remember, if the prisons are full with nonviolent drug offenders, maybe they're too full for the white-collar criminals too.
Yeah, I think this is an important step. We have to also just kind of destigmatize drug abuse and drug users. We need to make them not look like the devils they are made out to be.
So very, very good news that President Obama is doing this. We are going in the right direction, broadly speaking, although the change is, let's put it this way, the change is not happening nearly as quickly as it did over the last 11 years with same-sex marriage in the United States, but maybe it will accelerate.